Welcome to our workshop, Fake News, Real News. Hello, my name is Dr. Terri Summey, and I am a research and instruction librarian at Emporia State University. On this slide is my contact information, my email address at tsummey@emporia.edu, and my office is located on the second floor of White Library. If you have any questions or you need help with finding library resources or using our services, please contact me for assistance. So today's workshop, we're going to talk about the definition of fake news. We're going to talk about why fake news is a problem. We're going to look at the issues of filter bubbles, echo chambers, and confirmation bias. And then we're going to end with what you can do to stop the spread of fake news, because it's up to you. And hopefully along the way, we can maybe have a little bit of fun. So what is fake news? Fake news is all of these different things. One of the different things is disinformation for profit. These are hoax sites that can create fake news stories for economic gain or profit. They may also include things like clickbait, where the creator puts up a picture or puts up a headline that kind of captures you or brings you in, and then the creator of that profits from the number of clicks. It may also be disinformation for political gain. This would be state-funded fraudulent websites set up by one country to sow confusion in another. Partisans who want to influence political beliefs and policymakers. A good example would be the Russian interference in our election in terms of setting up websites or putting out fake news articles on social media to be able to influence people in favor of either one party or another, in favor of one candidate or another, or in the sense of possibly Russian influence, might be to sow doubt and distrust in our democratic system. Hacking would be another way. Hackers can gain access to websites or social media accounts of reputable news outlets and disseminate fake stories. Viral pranks, which are hoaxes that are spread for fun, may start out just as something that's fun to begin with, and then it goes viral and it is shared all over. Another one might be uncritically spreading. A hoax that could be spread widely enough that a credible news outlet maybe reports on it as fact or as a rumor. Or what happens most of the time is you have individuals that share sites without critically examining it to see if it is true or if it is not. And finally, you might have poor, untrained journalists. Our pressure of a 24 hours news cycle, as well as the explosion of news sites that we have available to us, can contribute to shoddy writing that doesn't follow professional journalistic standards or ethics. So these are just some reasons on what fake news is. Now, what is it? What is fake news not? Fake news is not satire websites. There are specific websites like The Onion that write news parodies. But unfortunately, there are some people who may not know that these are satire, and they may mistake them for fact. There's also satirical stories that might be in regular news sites. Opinion and feature writers in the mainstream media sometimes use satire or fanciful hypothetical examples to make a point and to get your attention. You would also want to know that if you're looking at something that's an opinion piece, that's somebody's opinion and may have mostly factual stuff in it, but it also is going to include their opinion. Honest reporting mistakes. Even the best reporters sometimes get things wrong. Maybe they report things as fact before they're confirmed, or they get spun by sources who aren't telling the whole truth. But if there's no intention to fool anyone, it's not fake news. And finally, journalism you don't like. Just because you don't like a story or you don't like a fact or you don't like what the author or the journalist is saying, that doesn't make it fake news. And unfortunately, I think in the past 5 or 6 years, that's what's happened. When people don't like what they're hearing, then they call it fake news. Or if they don't like the story that's been written about them, then they call it fake news, even though it's possibly true. So one of the things to look at is misinformation versus disinformation. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information that is mistakenly or inadvertently created or spread. The intent is not to deceive. So the intention here is what's important and what distinguishes the two here. Because with misinformation, you don't intend to deceive, it just happens. However, on the other side, disinformation is false information that is deliberately created and spread in order to influence public opinion or obscure the truth. So when we were talking earlier about the social media posts that maybe are put out by spurious people that want to influence an election, that's probably more disinformation as opposed to misinformation. One issue with all of this is continued influence effect, and it is a key with misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is sticky and resistant to correction. So even if somebody publishes something and then they put a retraction out there or provide evidence to the contrary, people believe what they first heard or they first read. Often when retractions are such as in the newspaper or somewhere else are said, they're usually buried, and so you don't hear them right away. So one way to overcome this is to not mention what was originally presented, because that would be stick in people's minds, but to actually go back and just present simple and brief messages focusing on the new correct information than repeating the incorrect information. An individual's pre-existing attitudes and worldviews influence how they respond to information. One of these concepts is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which falls under cognitive bias. And I do hit some bias later, but people believe that they are smarter and more capable than they are. Especially the more incompetent somebody is, the more competent they believe they are. They can't recognize their own incompetence. Many of us have experienced this phenomenon in real life. You may know an individual that began spouting off on a topic at length, proclaiming that he or she is correct and everyone else's opinion is stupid, uninformed, and possibly just wrong. Maybe it may be evident to everyone else that's around that this person has no idea what he or she is talking about. Yet they continue to go on and they're oblivious to their own ignorance. Incompetent people are poor judges of their own competence and overestimate their own knowledge and ability. Some of the research that I've done is on emotional intelligence, and one of the things that research has discovered is that people who have lower emotional intelligence do not recognize that they do and may self-evaluate their emotional intelligence a lot higher than it actually is. Incompetent people tend to overestimate their own skill levels. They fail to recognize genuine skill and expertise of other people, and they fail to recognize their own mistakes. So why is this important? Well, the image here is of the Comet Pizza place that was kind of one of the things in the 2016 election. According to the information that was put out there on some spurious websites, there was a child sex pornographic ring running out of the basement of this Comet Pizza place. And so an individual with a gun went in there, killed people, and it was, you know, a big news, big story. There's no basement here. There's no child sex ring running out of there. That was just information that was put out to discredit somebody. And so we have a need in our world for an objective reality. Part of democracy is having a informed populace, people with information, that will create a society with a common ground of knowledge that we can build on. Unfortunately, in our world in the last few years, we've had a burst of anti-intellectualism and anti-science. So anti-science and anti-intellectualism is that you don't believe what the science is telling you, or you don't believe what the research is telling you, and you don't believe the facts, instead relying on your own opinion or the opinion of others. All of this out there with the fake news and the real news and this misinformation and disinformation really make it harder for people to believe the truth. They don't know what to believe. And then another outcome is that it might accelerate or deepen that polarization that exists in our country, driving some consumers to drop some news outlets. So maybe you used to watch CNN, but now CNN just makes you angry. So you go either to the right to Fox News, or you go to the left to MSNBC, or maybe even go further and you go to Newsmax on the farther right. It might also cause them to simply consume less information overall, which means then they have less information. The other thing is it may cause them then to cut out social relationships and cut out some of the people that they enjoyed spending time with. So let's have a little bit of fun. I've got an article here that was pulled off of Facebook. It says, going to bed last thing Tempur-Pedic CEO wants to think about after a long day at work. Having spent his part of the last 12 hours embedded in the daily struggle to bring a relaxing sleep to customers, Tempur-Pedic CEO Scott Thompson told reporters Wednesday, last thing you want to think about after an exhausting workday was going to bed. Is this real or not? You know, it's hard to tell. It doesn't give us a lot of details here. It has the headline. I think if you probably search the headline, you may find that this came from a site like The Onion. And so it would be a satirical news article, but it looks really real. And there are websites where you can go out and you can create your own social media postings that look real. So you can create your own fake news. Okay, here's this next one. This one, if I look at the clues, it says it's from NPR. It has the NPR symbol there, which looks pretty good. It talks about what's become of our brain and why doesn't America read anymore? And so I'm looking at this, and that might fall in with my beliefs. And so without even looking at it, I might click share without even read the article. But if you look a little closer, you'll notice that it was published on April 1st, 2014. Well, there's a couple issues there. One is that it's 2014, so it's 7 years old. The other is that it was published on April 1st. We have April Fool's Day coming up, and April 1st is April Fool's Day. And so this was actually not real. It was published by NPR, so that part is real. But it was just to see how many people would click on a link or how many people would actually share on the link without actually clicking on the article. And so they were able to capture that data. Unfortunately, it was a lot of people that shared the article just from the picture and the little blurb without actually clicking on the link and reading the article and seeing that they had been fooled by an April Fool's joke. Is it real? Tom Tato plant grows both tomatoes and potatoes. This looks a little bit hard to believe, doesn't it? However, if you do a little more research, this appeared in a science magazine, and in the science section here where it shows up. This is actually true. This horticulturist actually grafted a tomato plant onto or with a potato plant. And so he was able to get tomatoes and potatoes out of the same plant. Now, self-sustaining, and would this go on any further? Probably not, because they were grafted together. However, it's a unique concept, and it actually is real. It would definitely save garden space if you could do more of this. So one of the things with fake news is we are responsible for the spread of fake news. Sometimes we want to blame it on the algorithms in Google, or we want to blame it on the media. But we are the ones that are responsible because we're the ones that share things. We're the ones that continue those conversations. So what can we do to stop the spread of fake news? One of the first things is to read beyond the headline. The goal of that headline is to capture you. And many people make the mistake of not reading the entire article. Whoever's written that headline or put that post on Facebook, they want to get your attention. They want you to click on it because chances are they're getting paid advertising by the amount of clicks that they have. And so they want you, because we have busy lives, they want you to just go ahead and share that without reading it. But you don't want to send it out or share it until you've read beyond that headline and even beyond the first paragraph, because some spurious sites will also write a good first paragraph and then the rest of it is just trash. So you want to make sure that you are reading the entire article and not just looking at the headline or looking at that first paragraph. Another thing is to check the source. This doesn't the author, I'll get to the author next, but this is go through the site and the page and scour through its other stories, analyzing them for repeat bias or questionable content. What are they sharing? Where is their information coming from? Do they list sources that they've used to create their information? Who is the publisher or the sponsor? Does the publisher or sponsor have a particular bias? So is it a source that could possibly be biased? And like I said, where did they get their information from? So to spend some time doing your homework and checking out the source. What does the source believe? Is it a source you've heard of before? Like I said, what other types of resources do they write and publish? Along with it, so this is a media bias chart that was put together by allsides.com, which is, we'll get to it later, but that's a place that you can check facts. And what it's showing you is where the media kind of stands from the center to like Breitbart News on the far right, Fox News opinion pieces, which are the late night things on the right. And then you have Fox News that is leaning right. And then you have left leaning, you have things like CBS, NBC, Bloomberg, NPR. And then on your far left, you have things like BuzzFeed, Alternet, the Huffington Post, Mother Jones, MSNBC. So a lot of different things that are listed there. So what can we do? Looking at this media chart, this is a good chart to refer back to, is you want to avoid news sources with bias in the tagline or the title. For example, when you're looking at some of these where it says, Fox News might have some bias, the American Spectator, but when it says the American Conservative, you know that it's going to have a conservative lean. It's not going to have a liberal viewpoint on there. On the other hand, there's a site called Occupy Democrats that I see occasionally on Facebook. And so that's going to be a little more on the left side. You want to avoid news sources that insult or ignore alternative views. So for example, some of the late night things on like Fox News or possibly on CNN or MSNBC might call out the other news stations. Or they may call out, if they call out alternative views. You want to get a multiple of perspectives. You want to get a lot of different viewpoints. Another thing is make sure that you have a basic understanding of government structures and how they work. Know about where political borders are, what disputes are happening around the world, what is the difference between some private and public sector. And what is the difference between liberals and conservatives? What do conservatives believe? What do liberals believe? So you kind of want to have some of that background knowledge. If you don't have it, look it up. Look for information on that to help you learn a little bit. Curiosity is one of the best cures for fake news or for fighting of this. Being curious and wanting to look things up and learn more. Don't live in a bubble. And later I'm going to talk about filter bubbles and echo chambers. You're already living in a bubble if you've blocked friends or relatives who disagree with you on social media. If all of the trusted people in your life are ideologically aligned and you only receive news from agreeable sources. Finally, if you refuse to discuss or respect political differences, you're probably living in a bubble. One thing to remember is that most TV news has a slight liberal bias, which you can see this on the chart with CBS and NBC kind of falling on the left. And so that prompted the creator of Fox News to develop a stronger conservative bias, or a conservative station. This was created after the Nixon and the Watergate, because he felt that the mainstream news channels were not giving Nixon a fair shot, or were not giving him the best press. And so they went ahead and created Fox News to be able to provide that conservative viewpoint. Beware of human interest stories about murder, kidnapping, and crime. News stations are trying to get your interest. They're trying to get your, they want you watching, because then they get paid advertising revenues. And so they use negative stories to skew reality for the sake of higher ratings. So if you begin to think that everything in the world is bad and all you're seeing are things that are bad, you might want to disconnect for a little bit, or look at positive things for a little while. Diversify your news intake. Read up-to-the-minute news and weekly, monthly publications, all from a variety of sources on the political spectrum. So you might look at NPR, you might look at CNN, you might look at MSNBC, you might look at Fox News, USA Today, and NPR, listen to them. So look at a variety of things. Time Magazine, New York Post. So look at some different things to figure out what it is that's happening out there and what's saying. And so get a lot of sources that are at different places on the political spectrum. And finally, make a serious effort to understand the other side. Start by assuming that people are good and that you want the best in people, and then ask questions of somebody that disagrees with you or says something that you disagree with. Listen to them. Listen to people more than you talk. And so we can learn a lot by listening. And I think that's one of the things that maybe we haven't done as much is listen. Check the date, and you could also say check the time. Sometimes a story from years ago can be reposted, so that reading one is a good example. 2014, it could be reposted again this year to give the impression of a recent development for various reasons. There's a lot of hoaxes or folklore things that just kind of keep cycling around, and you see them on a regular basis. So make sure you check the date that it was originally posted. You also want to check the author. When checking on the credibility of information, one way is to check out the credibility of the author or creator of the source. Does the information have an author? Is one listed? Sometimes it's difficult to find who the author is. If the site or the article mentions the author, or you find out an author, Google them to check their credentials. What is their background? What expertise do they have to write in this area? What jobs have they held? What research have they done on the particular subject, or what else have they written? So a lot of questions that you can think about. You might also want to verify what you're reading or the story with other news outlets. A very easy way to do this is cross-verification. Check out the story if your reading has been covered by other things. So for example, I saw a story about goats going down a California city street. And so I checked it out to see what was going on. And it's true, they're using goats to eat down, because goats will eat anything, to eat down all of the scrub that might be around, that might be on fire in California for some of the California wildfires. And so there were goats in the middle of a street in one of the cities. And it possibly could have been during the pandemic, when there weren't as many people out and about, when people were locked down at home. Check your biases. So on this page, I've listed several types of cognitive biases. Are you sure you're confident of the story's validity, or are your personal biases clouding your judgment? There's several types of biases that we might face. As human beings, we all have biases. We can't avoid them. Even researchers doing research have some type of bias. Even if we believe that we are open-minded and we use facts to make decisions or to influence our conclusions, some bias is going to shape our opinion at some time. Part of the reason is we experience, as humans, psychological discomfort or mental conflict when we encounter things like attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors that conflict with our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Confirmation bias is one type of bias. Once again, this is a cognitive bias that favors information that confirms your previously existing beliefs or biases. As humans, our beliefs are core to who we are, and they really create who we are as people and who we see ourselves as, our self-view. And they're very difficult to change. That can impact then how we gather, how we influence, how we disseminate or spread information. Usually following this, then we will seek information that confirms our existing beliefs, and that can prevent us from looking at things objectively. Examples might be not seeking out objective facts, interpreting information to support our existing belief, only remembering details that uphold our belief, and ignoring information that challenges our beliefs. Biased assimilation. That means that new evidence encountered is interpreted so it supports a desired conclusion or can be assimilated into our pre-existing assumptions and expectations. So this goes back into some of those beliefs again. People are willing to search and read information that matches their pre-existing beliefs, and they will abstain from reading or ignore or even not believe information that's inconsistent with their beliefs. Motivated reasoning, and then more specifically, politically motivated reasoning, is where individuals engage in this bias as a way to avoid or lessen cognitive dissonance. It's a form of reasoning where individuals access, construct, and evaluate arguments to arrive at a preferred or a predetermined conclusion and make decisions that are most desired rather than those that accurately reflect evidence. This is a pervasive force in politics, as the motivation to conform is stronger than the motivation to be right. It means that we think we can persuade, if we think that we can persuade people on the other side of a political debate with evidence, research indicates that the other side might become more entrenched. So it actually would backfire, and they become more entrenched in their view or belief. Finally, we have selective exposure. People seek out information that defends and supports their attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, and we avoid information that's contradictory. For example, after we have come to a decision, like maybe buying an appliance or buying a car, we may avoid things like things that talk about cars, things that talk about major appliances that might indicate that we made a wrong decision. Filter bubbles and echo chambers. So this is a picture of a filter bubble. Could also be kind of an echo chamber. So filter bubbles come about because of the personalization of news sources and like our search screens like Google. And so as they use those algorithms, they usually will send in things that you like and take away things that you disagree with. So you may even see this happening on your Facebook feed. Where people who maybe think differently than you have suddenly disappeared from your Facebook feed. And so that puts you in that filter bubble where things are being filtered as they get in, and so you're not seeing everything, but you don't know what's being filtered and you don't know what you're missing on. In that same way, we have echo chambers, whereas, you know, if you say something against a wall or something, it echoes back at you. That's the same kind of thing. It's where you have people that surround you that all believe the same thing. And so you're not hearing a diverse view of opinions. And so you're just hearing the same echoes from everybody else that you believe. And so those are things that we want to burst out of. And like I said, curiosity is a good way to do it. And then using some of these tools are good ways to be able to do that. One of these ways is this technique, which is called 4 moves in a habit, and it helps you remember to evaluate what you're reading before you share. So your habit is to check your emotions. When you're reading something on social media or the paper, or when you're watching it on television, what do you feel when you see or read it? Do you feel strong emotion, things like happiness, anger, pride, vindication? And does that emotion push you to share that fact with others? Then you need to stop and go through the 4 moves to do some fact checking first. So move number 1 is check for previous work. Has anyone else fact checked the claim? Many provocative claims on the internet have already been fact checked or researched. News coverage, trusted online sites, or fact-checking sites like Snopes or PolitiFact may give you a synthesis of the information. 2 would be go upstream to the source. Sometimes the source isn't the original provider of the information. Find that original source, follow the embedded links, watch for sponsored content, and use search tools. If the claim is about research, try to find the original journal that it appeared in. If the claim is about an event, try to find the news publication in which it was originally reported. Move 3 is to read laterally. That means read what others say about the source of the claim. Use other sites to check the reputation and biases of your source, especially your author and publisher. Sites like Google, Wikipedia, and Media Blast Fact Check are good places to read laterally. So read what other sources are saying about what happened. And finally, move 4 is to circle back. If you hit dead ends or you get lost, start again with what you already know is true. Sometimes these moves will suggest that a source is not accurate or credible, but it's more complex than you thought, and it may lead to a dead end. So stop and use what you learned to begin a better informed search. Is it a joke? There are some things that are too outlandish to be believed, and so that might be satire. Research the site and author to be sure. These are just a small number of the satire sites that are out there. They're some of the most popular, like The Onion, the Daily Feed News, the Babylon Bee, and the Borowitz Report. So check those out. Wikipedia has a good list of satirical news sites. And so I think if you put in satirical news, they're going to come up, and it kind of gives you an idea of what's out there. Consult the experts. There are many fact-checking websites on the internet, and those are one of the first places that I will go. These could already expose a questionable article, or if you want, a lot of times you can submit your question or your issue or your claim and ask them to do an analysis on it to see, is it something that's true or not. So these are some fact checker tools that are available. Factcheck.org is one of them that I like to go into. It's a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit consumer advocate for the voters that aims to reduce the level of deception and confusion in American politics. We could always use less deception and confusion in politics. We monitor the actual accuracy of what's being said by major U.S. political players in the form of TV ads, debates, speeches, interviews, and news releases. Their goal is to apply the best practices of journalism and scholarship to increase public knowledge and understanding. PolitiFact.com is another place that I go to. It's a fact-checking website that rates the accuracy of claims by elected officials and others on its Truthometer, going from very truthful to liar, liar, pants on fire. Snopes, another site that I really like. It's the definitive internet reference source for researching urban legends, folklore, myths, rumors, and misinformation. And then finally, All Sides. All Sides is that news website that presents multiple sources side by side in order to prove the full scope of news reporting. So I can pick a current story and I can look at it on the right, on the left, and in the middle to see what they're saying about it. This last resource is the Verification Handbook. It's authored by leading journalists from the BBC, Storyful, ABC, Digital First Media, and other verification experts. It's a resource for journalists and providers. It provides tools, techniques, and step-by-step guidelines on how to deal with user-generated content during an emergency. However, even though it's targeted for journalists and emergency aid providers, it can be used by anyone to research social media. So it provides some tips and tricks that you can implement and use to check out social media veracity. And one of the last things is do your own research. This is where that curiosity comes in again. Be curious, want to know more, want to learn more, want to read more. There's nothing to lose from gaining more knowledge. If you doubt a certain claim made in a news story, research it research it yourself to get clarification. In the age of the internet, ignorance can be a choice. All kinds of data can be found online from various sources, and a great percentage is available to the public for free. Make use of this opportunity to learn more on the topic in question and sort out your doubts on your own. So these are just some things to remember when combating fake news. Remember that Google is your friend. To verify a story's facts or search for a story on other outlets, the best way forward would be to use a search engine, of which Google is the most widely used, but you can use others. Your personal biases are your enemies. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion, but opinions are not always loyal to facts. So you want to maybe go to the facts. There are people that believe the earth is flat or that global warming is a hoax. These individuals are entitled to their opinions, but just because you believe doesn't mean it's true. And finally, or check your emotions. How does that reading that article or that post make you feel? And then attack the story. Doubt is your most powerful ally. Scrutinize the story for lapses, loopholes, and take an adversarial stand against the claims until you're satisfied by research that it's true. This is a fun game where you can test yourself. Factitious. You can actually just do a Google search for Factitious and the game will come up, where you can go through and you can swipe right if something is true, swipe left if it's not, and you will get a score. So thank you for being with us today. Do you have any questions? I will stay on the line for about 10 to 15 more minutes to answer any questions that you might have. If not, you can always email me at tsummey@emporia.edu, or you can come find me in the library.